You are sitting in your car on the freeway doing 70 miles an hour, and there is this sound, this relentless, skull drilling, high pitched whistle threading itself through the left side of your door frame, like someone left a tiny window cracked open, except every window is fully closed and you checked it 3 times already because the noise is making you absolutely insane. You turn up the radio, the whistle cuts right through it, you turn it up more. Your passenger says something to you and you have no idea what they said, so you just nod and hope it was not a question with a wrong answer, because you cannot hear anything over this aerodynamic screaming that is somehow being produced by your $30,000 vehicle that you vacuum every weekend and treat like a member of the family. You shout back something and they shout something, and by the time you hit your exit, you are both irritated and exhausted and you have not even done anything yet. You get home, you run your hand along the door seal, and the rubber feels hard. It feels flat. It feels like something that used to be alive and soft and is now just a tired, dried out strip of material that has completely given up on doing its job. So you do what everyone does. You pull out your phone, you search the symptom, and within 4 minutes, you are staring at a dealership service estimate that wants $340 to replace the weather stripping on a single door. Maybe more? Maybe they find something else while they are in there. Maybe you end up leaving $400 lighter and spending your Saturday afternoon sitting in a waiting room that smells like burnt coffee and broken dreams, watching daytime television on a screen mounted too high on the wall, all because your door rubber dried out. Here is what that dealership is never going to tell you. The rubber is not dead, it is not destroyed. It is not cracked through or structurally compromised. It is just thirsty. It is profoundly, deeply dehydrated, and the fix costs $3 and takes less time than it takes to parallel park. You do not need new parts. You do not need a labor appointment. You do not need to hand over $300 to a service writer who already knows exactly what the actual problem is. What you need is a small tube of pure liquid glycerin from the pharmacy aisle of any drugstore, grocery store, or big box retailer on the planet. This is not a specialty product. It is not automotive. It is not marketed toward car people at all. It sits on the shelf next to the hand lotion and the aloe vera gel, and it costs somewhere between $2 and $4 depending on where you live, and it is the single most effective rubber restoration compound that exists on Earth. And the reason it works so catastrophically well is not accidental. Glycerin is a humectant, which means its entire chemical purpose in life is to attract water molecules and pull them into whatever material it contacts. When you work it into dried automotive rubber, it does not just coat the outside. It penetrates the microscopic cellular structure of the seal and physically draws moisture back in from the surrounding environment and locks it there. The rubber absorbs it, the rubber swells, it expands back toward its original factory dimensions, the cross-section gets thicker, the lip gets fuller, and that tiny gap that was letting highway winds scream through your door frame at 70 miles an hour closes completely. The seal presses against the door frame the way it did when the car was new. The cabin goes quiet. Not quieter, quiet. And you spent $3. Now, before you hear that and think this sounds too simple, I need you to understand something about who benefits from you not knowing this. Your dealership has a service department that exists to generate revenue. The service advisor who quotes you $340 for weather stripping replacement is not diagnosing your car as someone who cares about your outcome. They are processing your car through a menu of billable services that have fixed labor rates attached to them. Replacing door seals is a legitimate line item on that menu. The fact that the rubber does not actually need replacing is not information that benefits them financially, so it is not information they are going to volunteer. The fact that a $3 tube of glycerin from a pharmacy will accomplish the exact same result in 5 minutes with zero tools and zero disassembly is information that would cost them hundreds of dollars per customer per visit. So they simply do not tell you. And it is not just dealerships. It is the independent shops, the quick lube chains, the mobile mechanics who quote you a seal replacement the moment you describe highway wind noise, because every single one of them knows that rubber dries out. Every single one of them knows that dehydrated rubber swells back up when it gets moisture reintroduced. and every single one of them is looking at that $300 job and making a decision that keeps money flowing toward their business and away from yours. Hit the subscribe button right now. That is not a throwaway request. Every single video on this channel is built around the exact same principle you just heard. The information that keeps money in your pocket and out of the hands of people who are financially motivated to keep you dependent on expensive services you do not actually need. Subscribing costs you nothing. The dealership yacht gets a little smaller every time you do. Now, let us talk about the actual science, because I want you to understand this at a level deep enough that you can explain it to someone else and sound completely certain, because you will be completely certain. Automotive weather stripping is manufactured from EPDM rubber, which stands for ethylene propylene diene monomer. This is a synthetic rubber compound that is specifically engineered to be flexible, compressible, and resilient across a wide range of temperatures. When it comes off the factory line and gets installed on your vehicle, it is saturated with plasticizers and elastomers, which are the chemical compounds that give it that soft, almost spongy quality that lets it compress when you close the door and spring back when you open it. That compression and recovery cycle is exactly what creates the airtight seal. The problem is that EPDM rubber is not immune to the environment it lives in. Every single day your car sits outside or gets driven, ultraviolet radiation from the sun is attacking the surface of that seal and breaking down the chemical bonds that hold those plasticizers in place. Every winter freeze pulls moisture out of the cellular structure of the rubber. Every hot summer bake accelerates the off-gassing of those elastomers. Over 3, 4, 5 years, the cumulative effect of that UV exposure and thermal cycling is a seal that has lost a measurable percentage of its internal moisture and plasticizer content. The cross-sectional geometry of the seal shrinks. It used to be a full, round, proud bead of rubber that made firm contact all the way around the door frame. Now it is a flat, hardened strip that only makes intermittent contact, and those intermittent gaps are exactly where the wind finds its way in at speed. At 30 miles per hour, you might not hear it. At 50, you notice something. At 70, it is a physical presence in the cabin, a constant tonal whistle, or a low rushing roar depending on the specific gap geometry, and it does not go away. Glycerin attacks this problem at the chemical level. As a hygroscopic compound, it has a natural affinity for water molecules that is stronger than almost any other substance you can apply to rubber in a non-destructive way. When you work it into the surface of the seal, it begins migrating through the porous microstructure of the EPDM, traveling into the interior of the material through the same pathways that UV exposure used to remove the plasticizers. As it moves through those channels, it pulls atmospheric moisture with it and binds it to the rubber polymer chains. The rubber literally rehydrates from the inside out. The cells that had collapsed and flattened from dehydration plump back up. The seal physically increases in cross-sectional size. You can measure it if you wanted to. The bead that was flat and hard becomes round and slightly yielding again. And when you close that door, it compresses against the frame the way it was engineered to, creating an airtight barrier that wind cannot penetrate at any highway speed. Now, I want to spend a moment destroying something that a lot of people reach for first when they notice their seals are going bad, because the automotive industry has done a spectacular job of selling you an expensive solution to this problem that actively makes it worse over time. Walk into any auto parts store and you will find a shelf full of rubber conditioner and seal protectant sprays. The packaging looks authoritative. The labels say things like restores flexibility and conditions and protects. The price is usually somewhere between $8 and $15 for a small aerosol can. And I want you to understand exactly what is inside that can, because it is going to change how you read those labels forever. The active ingredient in the vast majority of aerosol rubber conditioners is silicone, specifically polydimethylsiloxane, which is a form of silicone that is cheap, widely available, and exceptionally good at making rubber look shiny and feel temporarily soft. The problem is not the silicone itself. The problem is the carrier system that delivers it. In an aerosol format, that silicone has to be suspended in a propellant and a solvent system, typically a mixture of volatile hydrocarbons or alcohol-based compounds that allow the product to spray as a fine mist and evaporate quickly so the surface feels dry to the touch. Here is what actually happens when you spray that on your weather seal. The propellant and solvent hit the rubber first, and they do what solvents do, which is they temporarily open up the porous surface of the material and pull out whatever residual plasticizers are still in there, exactly the opposite of what you want. Then the silicone deposits on the surface and gives you that shiny, conditioned appearance that makes the product look like it is working. And for maybe 3 to 5 days, the seal does feel slightly softer because the surface has been slightly plasticized by the silicone film. But silicone sitting on the surface of rubber does not penetrate. It does not rehydrate. It does not restore internal moisture content. It sits there looking good until it weathers off, usually within a week or two of normal outdoor exposure, and when it leaves, it takes a little more of the natural plasticizer content with it because that solvent did its damage during application. Your seal is marginally drier after using that product than it was before. You just paid $12 to accelerate the dehydration process and get a temporary cosmetic improvement. Glycerin does none of that. There is no solvent system. There is no carrier that has to evaporate. It is pure, undiluted, inert compound that the rubber simply absorbs and holds. Now here is exactly how you do this. And I need you to follow these steps precisely because there is one critical step at the end that is not optional, and if you skip it, you will damage your car in a way that is genuinely expensive and genuinely permanent. Start by getting your $3 tube of pure glycerin. This is usually sold as glycerin suppository base or glycerin USP in the pharmacy section. Make sure it says pure glycerin or 100% glycerin on the label. Some products are diluted with water or contain additives, and those will still work, but the penetration rate and the effectiveness are reduced. Pure is what you want. Step 1 is cleaning the seal. Take a damp microfiber cloth or any clean damp rag and wipe down the entire length of the weather stripping on the door you are treating. You are removing road grime, dust, and any surface residue that would act as a barrier between the glycerin and the rubber. Do not use any soap or cleaner, just water. Let it dry for 60 seconds or wipe it dry immediately. The surface just needs to be clean, not wet. Step 2 is the application itself. Squeeze a generous amount of glycerin directly onto your fingertips and begin working it into the seal with firm pressure. You are not wiping it on, you are massaging it in. Use circular motions, back and forth strokes, anything that drives the compound into the surface of the rubber rather than just moving it across the top. Pay special attention to the corners and the areas around the door frame that take the most UV exposure and the most compression cycling, because those are the areas that dehydrate fastest. You will notice the rubber starting to look different almost immediately. The gray, chalky appearance that characterizes dried out EPDM begins to darken as the glycerin penetrates. Work your way around the entire perimeter of the door. Use as much glycerin as the rubber will absorb. On a badly dehydrated seal, you will go through a surprising amount because the rubber is genuinely drinking it. Step 3 is the wait. Leave the door open and let the glycerin absorb for a minimum of 10 minutes. If the seal was severely dehydrated, 15 or even 20 minutes is better. You are giving the compound time to migrate through the porous structure of the EPDM and begin the rehydration process internally. You can apply a second coat during this waiting period if the first coat appears to have been fully absorbed. The surface should look slightly wet or glossy after application. If it looks dry again in under 5 minutes, apply more. Now here is the critical warning, and I need you to treat this as seriously as I am presenting it, because ignoring this step will cost you real money. Before you close that door, you must remove every single trace of excess glycerin from the surface of the seal. Take a clean, dry microfiber towel and aggressively buff the entire length of the weather stripping until no wet sheen remains and the surface feels tacky rather than slick. This is not optional. This is not something you can do a partial job on. Here is why. Glycerin in its liquid state is hygroscopic, which means it is constantly pulling moisture toward itself. When you close your car door after applying glycerin, the seal presses against the painted metal of the door jamb, and any excess glycerin that is still sitting on the surface gets clamped between the rubber and the paint in a thin, uniform film. That film acts as a lens. Under direct sunlight, It focuses and concentrates UV radiation against the clear coat of the paint in the door jamb area. The temperature at the paint surface under that glycerin film can exceed what the clear coat is engineered to tolerate, and the result is permanent blistering, bubbling, and delamination of the clear coat all the way around the door frame. That damage does not polish out, it requires repainting. So you do not close the door until every drop of excess glycerin is gone from the surface of the seal. The rubber has already absorbed what it needs. The excess sitting on top is waste material, and it needs to come off completely before any metal contact happens. Buff it, wipe it, go over it again, and then run your hand along it. It should feel slightly soft and slightly tacky and completely dry to the touch. Then and only then do you close the door. The result is immediate and it is not subtle. Drive that car at highway speed and the cabin will be silent in a way that might actually catch you off guard if you have been living with that wind noise for a long time. Not better, not improved, silent. The seal is making full contact around the entire perimeter of the door frame. The air gap that the wind was finding at speed is gone, and the noise is gone with it. Compare what just happened against the alternative. You drive to the dealership. You wait for a service advisor who is managing 8 other customers. You describe the noise. They do a walk-around inspection that takes 4 minutes. They come back and tell you that the weather stripping on the door has deteriorated and needs to be replaced. They quote you $300 minimum, possibly $400 if the part requires special ordering. You are now looking at leaving your car for the day, arranging a ride, coming back, and handing over money that you needed for something else, all to fix a problem that a $3 tube of pharmacy, glycerin, and 5 minutes of your time would have eliminated completely. The mathematics of this are almost offensive. The outcome is identical. The seal is restored to factory function. The cabin is quiet at highway speed. But one path costs you $3 and 5 minutes, and the other path costs you $300 and your entire Saturday afternoon. Share this video right now with someone you know whose car sounds like a wind tunnel on the freeway. You know exactly who that person is. Their car has that constant whistle or roar that they have learned to just live with because they think fixing it requires an expensive appointment. Text them this video right now. Tell them to stop at any pharmacy on the way home tonight and spend $3. Tell them it takes 5 minutes and it works completely. You just watched someone save $300 in the time it takes to watch a short video. Go be the person who passes that along. Every car owner you tell about this keeps money in their pocket and out of the service